Hello friends, welcome to the module 3 of Node.js Training course on my channel Let's Learn. In this module we will cover the essential topics like what is the synchronous programming, what is asynchronous programming, when to use synchronous programming and when to use asynchronous programming in our application, and the last one is different ways of asynchronous programming like callback functions, promise, async await. So before moving further, I would like to request to my viewers that if you are new to my channel, then please subscribe to my channel and press the bell icon to get the notification of more such videos. I will add the links of all videos of this tutorial in the description section. Now let's start. The first one is what is synchronous programming. So synchronous programming in Node.js refers to the style of writing code where each operation is executed one after other in a blocking manner. When one operation is being executed, the program waits for it to finish before moving to the next operations. In synchronous code, if one operation takes a long time to complete it, the entire program becomes unresponsive during that time. It is a kind of blocking code. Here, the only one available main thread gets occupied in completing one heavy operation like reading the file or interacting with the database, and thus other operations will have to wait till the completion of previous task. Now let's understand this by using some codes. So for this I am opening the Visual Studio, and here I have already created few code to save our time. So for synchronous programming I have created this file, and let me go through this code. So in this file what I am doing, that I am trying to read data from this file example.txt. This is the example.txt file I have created, and in this file this is the data that I am going to read. And to read the data I am using the file package of Node.js module. So I have imported it, and then the first line is console log, and then here I am calling the fs.read file sync. Read file sync works in a synchronous manner. It will first read the data of this file, and once the reading is completed, then only it will move to this line. Okay, till that time our whole program, our whole application will wait here at the line number 6. It will wait, and once this line number 6 is completed, that means file reading is completed, then only it will move to the line number 7 and it will print the data of this file. If any error is coming, then it will print this error here, okay, in the catch block, and at the end it will print this line. So this is how the synchronous code works, means here it will execute one line after another line. So let's execute this. So for this let's clean our terminal. Okay, terminal is cleaned. Now I am running this. So node, okay, so this has printed the data. So if you see here, first is program starts here. So first line is this one, and the second line it is printing data from the file. So this is the one. That means here file reading is completed at line number 6, and once this is completed, then control went to the line number 7 and it printed this console log, and whatever data it has read from this file, it is printing this data, and then at the end it is printing this line. So that's how the synchronous code works. So here if you see, this file size is very small. It is in just 1 or 2 byte data, so that's why it took just millisecond to read it. But think if this file is having 100 MB of data or 1 GB of data, then this line will take a lot of time to complete. Until that time your whole application will wait here, your main thread will wait here, and it will not be able to process any other request. So that's how it is a kind of blocking code. It will block your application at a particular line of code. So now let's understand some key features of synchronous programming. So these are the 4 key features of the synchronous programming. The first one is the blocking nature. So synchronous, as I told, synchronous code blocks the execution of the subsequent code until the current operation is complete. Now second feature is simple control flow. So here the code is very straightforward, flow is very simple, and it is easier to read and easier to understand. The third feature is limited concurrency, because here the operations are executed one after other. So synchronous code is not suitable for handling a large number of the concurrent operations efficiently. So it handles synchronously, and that's why it becomes a little slower. Potential for the performance issues. So as I mentioned, so long running synchronous operations can lead to the performance issue and unresponsiveness, especially in server application where the multiple clients needs to be served concurrently, and if any one of the client is having such a big operation like reading a very large file in the synchronous way, then it will block your code, it will block your application. So it will create a performance bottleneck. So this is all about the synchronous code. Now let's go with the asynchronous code. Asynchronous programming is a core concept in the Node.js that allows you to perform the non-blocking operations, making it highly efficient for the task like handling the IO operations. Asynchronous code doesn't wait for an operation to complete before moving to the next one, which allow the Node.js to handle the multiple operations simultaneously, and thus improving the responsiveness, scalability, and improves the performance also. Let's understand the asynchronous programming by using some code. So here also I have already created one file. So this is the file, that is the asynchronous code, and let's understand this code first. So it is same as the synchronous file I had created. Here also I am going to read the data from this file, that is the example.txt. This is the file example.txt. From this I am going to read the data, and this data reading will be done in asynchronous format. Okay, so for here I am using the read file. Earlier I had used read file sync. Now this is the read file. So this function is provided by the fs module of Node.js, and it will read the data from the file in asynchronous way. So first control will print this console log data, okay, and then control will come here and it will execute fs.read file, but control will not wait here till the completion of reading of this file. As soon as it executes, it will move to the next line, and next line is this one, console log, because this is a callback function that I am passing. So callback function we will study later. So here I am passing the callback function, so it will just execute this file, it will not wait till the completion, and it will come to the line number 14 and it will print this line. And once this file reading is completed, then control will come here and it will check for the errors. If there is any error, then it will handle the error and it will call the return statement. Once return statement is called, then it will not execute the next line of this callback function. That means it will not execute this. If there is not any error, then control will come to directly to this and it will execute this line. So, and while using the callback function, we will have to pass the callback function should be the last parameter. Like here I am passing as a last argument in this read file sync, and this callback function should follow a convention that this callback function should have the first parameter as an error object, and then rest of the parameter are the parameter that are going to be used in that callback function. So this is the convention of any callback function, and we should keep in mind while creating any callback functions. So now let's execute this. For this I am first cleaning the console, okay, and then I am running it. Okay, so if you see here, it is first printing programming starts here. That means this line it is printing, line number 3 it is printing. Okay, so first it is printing the line number 3, and then it executed this read file sync, but it didn't wait there, and it prints the line number 14, that is programming ends here. And once this reading is completed, then control comes here, and here there was no error, so it prints the data of the file, that is data from the file. This line it printed. Now what if some error is coming? For example, here I am giving the wrong file name. For example, here I am giving some wrong file path. Okay, then in this case it will not find the file, and then some error will happen, and control will come at the line number 8 and it will print the error, and then from here it will call the return statement, and thus this line number 11 will not be printed. Now let's try this. Okay, so let me save it and then I'm running it. Yeah, so if you see here, it has printed programming starts here, programming ends here, and then after that error has occurred, so it has just printed the error and it didn't printed this line. So that's how the asynchronous programming works. Now after this, let's move on. So the third point is when to use synchronous programming and asynchronous programming. Below are the scenarios or conditions that decides when to use the synchronous or asynchronous programming in our Node.js application. So the synchronous programming can be used in below three scenarios. So the first scenario is when the simplicity and predictability are crucials. So synchronous code follows the straightforward linear execution path and making it easier to understand and debug. Use synchronous programming for the simple scripts or applications where code simplicity is higher priority than the concurrency and performance, where on your application load is very less, very minimal, and you don't need to bother about the performance on concurrency, then you can use the synchronous programming. The second scenario is when blocking is acceptable. Okay, so in some cases you have the operations that are expected to block, and that's acceptable for your application. For example, suppose you want to read file 1 data first and then you want to write that data into the file 2. Then in this case, first reading of the file 1 should be completed, and then after that writing to the file 2 should be started. So here both should occur, both process should be done in synchronous way. Now the third scenario is when resource utilization is not a concern. So if your application does not need to handle a large number of the concurrent operations efficiently, or it is not a IO bound or synchronous programming, then in this situation synchronous programming can be utilized. Now let's think about the scenarios where asynchronous programming is needed. So for that I have noted down here the 5 scenarios. So first scenario is when concurrency and responsiveness does matter in your application. Asynchronous programming is essential when you need your application to handle the multiple tasks concurrently and remain responsive, especially in the server-side application where many clients may be making the request simultaneously and you need to process all the requests simultaneously. Now the second scenario is when IO operations are involved. When your application performs the IO bound tasks such as the file operations, network requests, database queries, and using the asynchronous code is crucial to prevent the blocking and maximizing your performance and resource utilization in your application. Now the third scenario is scalability is a concern, when scalability is a concern. So asynchronous programming is a key factor in building the scalable application. Node.js excels at handling many concurrent connections and requests because of its non-blocking and asynchronous nature. Now the fourth scenario is when performance is important. So asynchronous code can lead to the better performance because it doesn't block the event loop, allowing other tasks to be processed while waiting for the IO operation to complete. Now the fifth scenario is when complex workflows are there in your application based code. Okay, so in practice, many Node.js application uses a combination of both synchronous and asynchronous code. For example, you might have the synchronous initialization phase in your application at the start and then switch to the asynchronous operations when serving the client request. The key is to strike a balance that meet your application's requirement while considering the factors like performance, responsiveness, and code maintainability. It's important to carefully analyze your application needs and consider how different parts of your code base may be benefited from either synchronous or asynchronous programming to make the informed decision. Now let's move on to the fourth point. So fourth point is different ways of asynchronous programming. So there are 3 different ways of implementing the asynchronous programming in Node.js. These are either by using the callback functions, or by promises, or by async await. So here in this video we will discuss about the callback functions in detail with example. Promises and async await will be discussed in the next video. Now let's discuss about the callback functions. So under callback functions we are going to discuss about the few points like what is the callback function, how to use the callback functions, callback function chains, and pros and cons of the callback function, what is the callback issue, and how to run the callback functions in parallel, multiple callback functions in parallel. So all these things we are going to cover here with the examples. So first one is, what is the callback function? In JavaScript, a callback function is a function that is passed as an argument to the another functions and is executed when the other functions complete its task. Callback functions are commonly used for handling the asynchronous operations like file reading, network request, timers, database handling, etc. Now, the second point is how to use the callback function. So to explain how to use the callback function, let's do simple coding of file reading by using the callback functions. Okay. So for that also I have already created one function, that is the callback.js. Okay. So here what am I doing? Here again I am using the fs module of Node.js, and then at line number 3 I am printing one console log, and then here I am calling read file. Read file works in asynchronous way, and here I am passing this callback function. And as explained earlier, there is a convention for the callback function. The callback function should be the last argument of our function, asynchronous function, and in that callback function also the first argument should be the error object. And inside the callback function we should first check if there is any error. If there is error, then we should handle the error, and if there is not any error, then only we should move ahead. Okay, so if we will execute this, then it will first print this line, then it will execute read file in asynchronous way, and it will not wait here, and then it will come below and it will print this line, callback ends here. Okay, now let's see how it is doing. So if you see here, it is printing first line, that is the callback starts here, and then it is printing the last line, that is the callback ends here, and once file reading is done, then it is printing the data of this file. So that's how the callback function basically works. Now let's move on to the pros and cons of the callbacks. Let's move on to this topic, pros and cons of the callback. Although using callback functions provides asynchronous behavior in our Node.js application, yet it makes our code complex and less readable. If we are using the callback chain up to 5 or 6 hierarchy level, it becomes more complex to understand and debugging. Ultimately, it generates an issue that is named as the callback hell. Callback functions were generally used to get the asynchronous behavior in our application during the earlier versions of the Node.js, but the current versions of the Node.js are providing the promises and async await that can be very efficiently used to get the asynchronous behavior. So nowadays callback functions are basically not used in any new application, but yes, we should have the proper knowledge of the callback function, because whatever the application has already been created, those were created in callback functions, and when we are supposed to work on those applications, then we will have to have the callback knowledge. So callback hell is also known as the pyramid of doom, and it occurs when we have deeply nested the callback functions, making the code difficult to read and maintain. So suppose we are having 7 to 8 callback function, and we have nested those callback functions one after other by making the callback chains, and up to 7-8 level, then it becomes very difficult to debug and maintain that code, and it generates the callback hell issue. Now let's understand this with one example. So if you see, this is depicting the callback hell issue. So this is one operation. Here in this operation we are passing one callback function. Under this callback function we are calling another function. second function. Under this second function we are passing one callback function, then from this second callback we are executing the third function, and from third function again we are executing the fourth functions, and this will keep going on. For suppose if it is keep going on up to 8 or 10 levels, then it becomes you can understand it becomes very difficult to manage this code. So this is this behavior or this scenario is termed as the callback hell. Although it will not give any syntax error, but it will becomes very difficult to understand and very difficult to read, very difficult to debug. So generally we should avoid this scenario, and this can be avoided by using the async await or promises. So that I will discuss later. Here, okay, so here the last topic under the callback function is remaining, that is the running the callback functions in parallel. So here let's consider a scenario. Suppose we need to read data from the file 1 and file 2, and once reading data from both the files is completed, then we should write the data of both these files to a third file. So here we created the three callback functions. Two are for reading the files and third function is for writing the files. Here both the callback functions are created for reading the files, can run in parallel, and once both are completed, we got the data from both the files, then we can execute the third file. So here from this scenario we understood that first two callback functions should run in parallel, and once both are completed, once we got the notification that okay both are completed, then we will take the data from both the functions and then we will write that data into the third file. Okay, so this is the scenario. Now let's see how we can achieve this scenario, and this scenario is very much important because in our real-time application on daily basis we will face this kind of scenarios, and from interview perspective also this scenario is very important. Okay, so for this I have already created one file, that is the parallel callback, and let me go through the code so that you will get some idea. Okay, so here I'm using read first file, this functions I have created, and this function is reading data from the file 1.txt. okay, and here in this function I am passing the callback, and once reading is done, then it is executing the callback, it is calling the callback function. Then I have created the second file. This second file is reading the data from the file 2, and then I have created the third file, and third file is taking the two parameter. First parameter is data and second parameter is the callback, and this data I am going to write in the file 3. okay, now if we see, file 3 is blank, file 2 is having this data, and file 1 is having this data. Now let's come here how I am executing. So here what I need to do, I need to execute these two functions in parallel, and once both these read functions are completed, then I should execute the third function, that is the write. Okay, now for this, to achieve this, what I did, I converted the first function to a promise. I created one promise object. Under this promise I executed the read first file. Okay, and from the callback functions here I am calling the resolve data 1. So whatever the data is being read from the file 1, that I am resolving here. That means I am returning here and it is coming to the promise 1. So as soon as this line number 20 is getting executed, it will not wait here, it will execute, and the reading data from the file 1 will start. Okay, but it will not wait here, it will come here, and similarly it will execute the reading of the data from the file 2, and again it will not wait here, and control will come here, promise.all. And here what I am doing, whatever the two promises I have created, promise 1 and promise 2, those two promises I am passing to promise.all, and here control will wait till the completion of promise 1 and promise 2. Once these two promises are completed, then only control will come here. Okay, so it doesn't mean that your application will wait here. Your application, your main thread will be free to process another request. By that time these two promises are running. As soon as both the promises are completed, your control or your thread will come here and it will start executing the line number 43. So what I am doing at the line number 43, I am taking the data from the file 1 and from the file 2 I am taking the data. So here it should be 1, 0 and 1, and this I'm adding to one variable, and now I'm calling the third function, that is writing the data to the third file. And here whatever the final data we created, I'm passing that final data, and this is the callback function. So here it will execute the third file, and again it will not wait here, and it will come, control will come here once the writing to the file is completed, and then it will check if there is any error, it will handle the error. If there is not any error, then it will write this console log. Now let's execute. So here if we see, our control will first print the line 1, then it will execute all the promises, but it will not wait for the completion of the promises, and it will execute the line 2, and then it will run both promise 1 and promise 2 in parallel, and once both are completed, then it will execute the third function. Now let's run this and let's see what it is printing. Let's clean it. Let me save it. Okay, okay. So if we see here, let me maximize it so that we can see. So it is first printing the line 1, then it is printing the line 2, and then it executed reading of both the files in parallel, and once both are completed, then it is printing the data of file 1, file 2, and once reading is completed, then it is executing the function for writing the file, and once that function is completed, then it is printing the file 3. Now let's see whether data got added into the file 3. Now this as I had already shown, this file was blank. Now let's see. So now it is having the data from the file 1 and file 2. So this is how we can run the multiple callback functions in parallel, and once those functions are completed, then we can execute the other functions. So we can fulfill our scenarios like this way. So this is the end of this module. Today we have discussed about what is the synchronous programming, what is asynchronous programming, and when to use the synchronous programming, when to use the asynchronous programming, different ways of achieving the asynchronous programming behavior in our application. And we also understood the details of our callback functions, and under this we understood what is the callback function, how to use the callback function, what are the callback function chains, what are the pros and cons of the callback functions, what is the callback hell issue, and how to run the multiple callback functions in parallel. So all these things we understood today, and I will discuss about the promise and async await in the next video. Please do practice by doing some coding at your home at your free time, so that you will get hands-on on these concepts, and these are the basic building blocks of the Node.js. These are very important. So stay tuned for more exciting Node.js topic in this tutorial. Don't forget to like my videos and subscribe to my channel, and hit the bell icon to stay updated with the latest Node.js tutorial. If you have any question or need help, feel free to leave a comment below. Thanks for watching. Happy coding.